Have you thought of that moment though? First pick of the
first pick
2024.
of 2024 NFL draft. Yes, I do. If they draft me, my plan is to go work my ass off, get after it, get in the playbook heavily, and handle things the way things need to be handled.
Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears, to me, succeeded in making Chicago a place that has the requisite pieces to have a young quarterback be successful.
They got a good defense. They got good players on offense. It's pretty exciting, if you could go into a situation like that. I like to think that when it's time to be surgical, it's time to be surgical. There's been many games where it gets late in the game and I've ran or scrambled and threw a crazy pass. That's been the artist, the magician. And then there's been times where even when I hurt my hamstring and I couldn't run, I sat in the pocket the whole time, the rest of the game and delivered the ball. It's important to be in the pocket. It's part of the game. It's also important to be out of the pocket. I want to go to a place that wants to win.
All right, welcome everybody. Tonight we're doing a special live edition of our show 2 days before the 2024 NFL Draft. I know I'm pumped. I know David, I'm sure you're pumped. And yeah, we just kind of wanted to bring you a different kind of style of show. David, I don't know if you want to mute yourself a little bit. And yeah, there you go. We're going to go through and we're going to do something a little different, something we don't usually do. We're not big mock draft guys, and we're not big shove it down your throat during the off season guys either, right? So I know up to this point there's been content creators out there that have done hundreds of mocks and things like that. We have not done one yet, so we like to kind of just wait till the timing is relevant and whatnot. So with it being 2 days before the NFL draft, we figured we'd hop on here, do a little mock draft or two and whatnot, and just share our excitement about what's going to happen in here on Thursday night, huh? David, what do you think?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of like chime in, and mock drafts are fun. I think they're fun for everybody, and they're just like a fun a thing to do. It's like a fun thought experiment. But I like going into this, I was thinking really, really hard and like, how do we approach this, right? Because it's there's so many mock drafts out there about like what teams should do, what you would do, right? Like what's the best value pick and all that stuff. And I looked up 2023 mock drafts up until like the day before the draft last year, and just how wildly inaccurate they were. So just more than anything, like we're gonna be wrong. We're gonna be wrong as hell. But like I have a few rules in my head about how I want to like have these discussions. And yeah, I want to have fun with it, but also just kind of like be logical about it and not just be a Bears homer about it. I just want to like actually do a good first round mock draft. So
yeah, I think draft trades in general are probably one of the hardest things to predict, period.
Yeah.
Just in general, even throughout the professionals and whatnot, you just don't know what these teams are always thinking and what they're willing to do, what kind of offers are out there and whatnot. So it's really tough to sit here and predict any kind of accurate mock draft, which is why it's always, it's always fun to do, to sit here and just kind of like imagine and whatnot. But like you said, as far as realism goes, and accuracy goes, they're not usually typically very accurate. But like I said, we're here to just have some fun tonight, right? So
if I can just comment on one part about that too, though, which is the last year mock drafts and like the realism of everything. So I have Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft pulled up from like a few days before the actual NFL draft last year, and he was so good about it that he actually predicted the Texans doing the 2-3 back-to-back picks, and he predicted Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, right? And this is how bad even like the professionals get it, where it's Daniel Jeremiah. He had Will Levis going 4th to Indianapolis, Jalen Carter going 5th to Seattle. And then it only really gets worse. Like the Bears took Tyree Wilson, Nolan Smith went early, Zay Flowers went as early as 11. A lot of these are just like, I could throw out a bunch of names, but the back end of the first round had Jahmyr Gibbs falling all the way to 30 with the Philadelphia Eagles, and Darnell Wright going 31st to Kansas City. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a crapshoot even for the pros. So we're not coming out here saying how accurate we're going to be, but we're definitely going to have fun with it. And like, yeah, I mean, we can get into it once we. And he had Anthony Richardson going 20th to the Seahawks. So yeah, I have some rules that I'm going to elaborate on once we start doing the mock, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you're going to approach this too.
Yeah. So, well, as far as like just general NFL team needs, I think you're probably going to be a little bit more educated on that stuff than I am. I've been really kind of focused in on the Bears a lot. Like I have a good idea and whatnot. I just think you have a much better idea. So I'm probably going to follow your lead on most of it, but we'll see. I got some opinions on my own. I keep going back to this thing where I know I don't want to keep kicking a dead horse here, but like, man, those a lot of people still would love to get a wide receiver at pick 9. And it's funny because I did a little recording with Aldo from Barroom Network yesterday, and it's funny because he talked about the memory of Aaron Donald being drafted and how he really wanted Aaron Donald. He thought as soon as he felt past the Giants, there's no way the Chargers are going to wind up taking a defensive tackle because they're stacked at defensive tackle, right? And it's funny because it goes against like some of the things I believe in. Yeah. And when it comes to, they fully went into the best player available mode. And I just don't always buy into that, especially when you're in need of draft picks. Like they did not need a defensive tackle. Yeah, they went up there and took a defensive tackle. And he said one of Les Snead's comments on that was take the strength of your team and make it stronger. Like, I don't care that I don't need it. I'm going to sit here and take what we're good at and make it what we're excellent at. And I just thought that was kind of interesting because, like I said, it's not always a strategy that I personally would follow. And then, of course, we're going to wind up showing some comments here. So, like, Kimura Daddy says, please talk about the Byron Murphy gaslighting. Dude was a 3rd-round pick when the season ended, and now he's magically better than Newton and a blue-chip top 10 pick. David, you got a opinion on that at all or no?
So I don't know about the Byron Murphy. So I'm trying to put that sentence together. Gaslighting in terms of like gaslighting means he's being called out, I think, if I'm familiar with like gaslighting as a term.
So,
but I think he's being like elevated, hyped up.
Yeah.
So if I'm not mistaken, and this is maybe something that a lot of people have done on accident. So Texas has 2 defensive tackles projected in the NFL draft this year, and they're both, it's Tavondre Sweat and so Tavondre Sweat is projected to be about a 3rd-round pick, and Byron Murphy is projected to be a 1st-round, like top 15 pick. I don't know necessarily 100% like how close they were supposed to be in terms of like Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy both being 3rd-round picks. But I think a lot of people were accidentally confusing those 2 picks because they kept seeing like a Texas defensive tackle. Tavondre Sweat is much more of a nose tackle, and Byron Murphy is much more of a converted 3 technique. So I think I might know what he's talking about if that's the case. But otherwise, I don't remember the Byron Murphy early on projections being like 3rd-round picks. So I'm going to plead ignorance on that one. But there's a Tavondre Sweat argument to be made as him as like a 3rd-round pick. But Byron Murphy, from what I remember, don't quote me, was always projected to be like a pretty good 1st-round pick. So, and this happens in the draft. Like people rise up really, really quick, and then like the Will Levises of the world that fall into the 2nd round, and then like Darnell Wright was not anywhere near a top 10 pick, and then all of a sudden the guy was like a can't miss top 10 pick. So I think this
Yeah.
happens generally speaking, but I could be wrong.
It happens a lot with quarterbacks. I mean, we see it with quarterbacks all the time. We saw it with JJ McCarthy this year for sure, where it's like, hey, all of a sudden this guy's projected top 5, top 10. Like, where did that come out of? Because he was definitely towards the mid to late first round. I mean, he's towards the back end of the QBs that were coming out, at least at the start of the offseason. That was what the projection was. And so, it could be due to positional necessity. Hey, these teams need a defensive tackle, therefore this guy rises and whatnot. But I'm not sure if there's any other info I have other than that on it. So
I don't recall the Byron Murphy uprise or whatever you would call it, but generally speaking, I think he's been projected pretty high for the most part from what I remember.
All right. I want to see if I could try and pull up something here. I know this is, it's our first time doing like a full live show, so we may be a little bit.
Yeah, man. Hopefully I answered your question to some extent. I don't know. Sorry about that. I'm not super.
I don't even know.
I was a little confused by the phrasing too.
So, okay, here. Let me see if I can screen share this. If I can't, we'll just move on. But percent slides, no. All right, maybe I can't. So, all right, that's fine. I was going to talk about just wide receivers in general and the history of them, and why, although a lot of people do want a wide receiver, I just kind of want to go down the list for you guys real quick, just so we're all on the same page of where the history lies, right? So if you take a look at between the year 2000.
Sorry, Paul, you hit present and everything, and it won't show up.
Yeah, I'd have to. I mean, I could get it to show up. I'd have to save it as a PDF real quick because it only lets me do PDF. I don't know if you want to talk for a minute while I do that, and then I can bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, it was just more addressing like the Daniel Jeremiah stuff and everything, and like how the mock drafts are going right now. I think I've been really digging into this year's mock and like trying to kind of weed through the BS and like who's going where and everything. And I have been up and down every single day and like doing so much research on certain guys. Not going to pretend like I did research on everybody. But man, like I could see Drake May going 2, and I could see Drake May going like 6 or being like the 3rd or 4th quarterback taken. And then Caleb Williams, like doing your deep dives and stuff. Like, man, I don't know how you could, at the very least, like if you're a Bears fan, like I would hope that you're excited just because it's at the point where we're being nitpicky about like a guy's personality and everything. That just means he's like a really, really good prospect. Like, I don't know if he's going to work out. It's always a 50-50 chance, but man, like it's by far the best situation. I have a lot of points on the wide receiver thing, Paul, and we could do that. But yeah, with the Bears specifically.
I just want to kind of go over just the general history of the wide receiver position and where these guys hit and whatnot. So I put this little graphic together here, and off to the left where you see the pictures of the guys, those were the leading wide receivers per year for the last 10 years. So when we look at that, we got, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, T.Y. Hilton, Julio Jones, Antonio Brown, Josh Gordon, and Calvin Johnson, right? And so these were the top receivers in their respective years. And look, Tyreek Hill ultimately was a 5th-round pick, right? Justin Jefferson was a 1st. Cooper Kupp was a 3rd. Stephon Diggs was a 5th. Michael Thomas was a 2nd. You have Julio Jones as a 1st-round pick. Antonio Brown, a 5th. T.Y. Hilton, a 3rd. Julio Jones again, 1st-round pick, but Antonio again, 5th-round pick. Josh Jacobs was a 2nd-round pick in the supplemental draft, and Calvin Johnson, of course, was a 1st-round pick. But when you look at this in the last 10 years, 4 out of the 10 guys were 1st-round picks. So on top of that, when we take a look at just the extensive history a little bit further than that, between the year 2000 and 2023, when we have wide receivers who are being drafted top 10, Charles Rogers has a little X by his name because he did not live up to that draft pick or that career. Neither did Braylon Edwards. Larry Fitz was a good top 10 pick. Andre Johnson was a good one too. He led the league 2 times. Amari Cooper, I would say he's worked out relatively. Sammy Watkins, I put in next. AJ Green still had a decent career, but Peter Warrick failed. Corey Davis was a guy who didn't last long. Justin Blackmon didn't last long. A couple of these guys are still playing in the league, so I couldn't, make an opinion on them necessarily. But Kevin White, as we all know, was a bust. Darius Hayward-Bay didn't last long and didn't do much. Troy Williamson, Roy Williams, Drake London, Drake London was drafted recently, so he's still up for debate. But that's his tail end. This should say Tavon Austin, but he's got an X. John Ross, Ted Ginn, Reggie Williams, Corin Robinson, all busts. And then there was a receiver, Mike Williams, in 2005 that also didn't have much of a career. And as you can see, when we highlight the guys who actually have Super Bowls that were drafted top 10, I mean, you have Mike Evans, you have Plaxico Burress, who didn't win one with the team that he was drafted on. So just for whatever reasons, right? I try to stick away from drafting a wide receiver top 10 just because the history has shown me it just doesn't work out for teams for one reason or for another. When it comes to contract time, you have to pay these guys. They are worth a lot of money. A lot of them have attitudes. A lot of them are divas. You can get a talented wide receiver. It doesn't necessarily guarantee you any kind of long-term success in this league. And it's got to be done at the right time. I know I've mentioned it in the past before. We're like, I felt the Eagles were in a good position when they drafted Devonta Smith because they kind of had every other piece picked out. I don't think the Bears are in good enough position to be able to sit there and target a wide receiver at number 9 and come away with it and, have that be worth more than getting multiple draft picks from trading back and addressing some of these holes. I don't know, David, what do you think?
Just Nick Head's projection of ADP and Byron Murphy's rise. And yeah, he's definitely right. Like, we're talking early in the year though, by December and then through January. So we're talking like bowl season is still happening. And then he kind of just rose really quickly. So yeah, that's like towards I wouldn't even say that's the end of the NFL season. He's not wrong, not by any means. By 10, 12, it was very, very low by, let's say, mid-December, beginning of January, and then end of January. They did make a really good push at the end, Texas, and then had some good games against Washington and everything, Byron Murphy specifically. So yeah, I don't know what the explanation is. I mean, I think this happens every single year with certain players. Byron Murphy might just be that guy. Is he the best? Who knows? Jerzon Newton, Johnny Newton from like Illinois could be just as good, and he's like a late pick, and one of them might end up being the better guy. Who knows? But yeah, he's not wrong. But also at the same time, I think that's my only answer is like this just happens every draft cycle. There's always one guy who just kind of rises up right towards the end. And I think Darnell Wright is probably your prime example of that last year, right? Like he went from a second round, end of the first round guy to top 10 pick. And I wouldn't argue that it was worth it. I think it was very much worth it. And then at the same time, Paulie, maybe you remember his name off the top of your head, right tackle for Cleveland, ended up going to the third round and asked the massive animal human being from Ohio State.
Oh man, I do like the 6'7" monster.
Yeah. Jesus. And he was one of those exact guys from Senior Bowl. He was a first round hype guy.
From Ohio State.
Yeah, right tackle for the Cleveland Browns. Let me find him for you real quick.
DeJuan
Jones.
Yeah, DeJuan
Jones.
And
he was on the other side of that, right? So he was like first round, top 10, top 15 pick, and then he ended up going in the third round. Another guy that was a good example of that was the Penn State, I want to say defensive tackle, or it was the Illinois defensive tackle. He had a great Senior Bowl, went to like top 10 pick, and then he ended up going to the Colts, and he was just completely irrelevant. I think I sent him to you for a little bit. He had a very interesting name. I forgot. But I think it's just part of the draft cycle. I don't know. I'm sorry, man. I don't have the answer for you why Byron Murphy shot up the ranks. I did watch him, though, and the man's an animal. He's splitting double teams and getting tackles in the backfield, and he splits a double team and decleats people. Whether you like him or not, I personally like him. I think he's an absolute monster, and I think he'd be a really good compliment on this team. And the Bears, and specifically Matt Eberflus, have been begging for like a 3-tech for 3 years, and they've never gotten one. Hopefully Javon Dexter's it. But if not, Byron Murphy in a rotation is not like a problem to have on this team. Anyway, but that'll happen during the mock draft. Secondly, real quick, you don't have to pull up the graphic back, but I was like observing it as you were talking, and like you could, yeah. I mean, if you look at this though, real quick, and this is part of the problem we have with investing so much in the 9th pick with a receiver that you don't know if your quarterback is good yet, right? Like, I think there's not really much excuses for Caleb. Like, we are super excited for Caleb Williams, but he's got Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, 2 good tight ends, a good backfield, right? Like a solid offensive line compared for most rookies. And so I think he has enough for you to know within a year or 2 if he's worth the investment at first overall and if he's like generational. But I don't know if it's worth like loading up this room with a bunch of wide receivers and then Caleb Williams is a bust and now you're stuck with Rome Odunze and DJ Moore and you got to pay these guys and you have no answer at quarterback. Because you look at the guys who are successful and the guys who are failures on this just list here, a lot of them I'm having a hard time remember who their quarterback was, but Tyreek, Tua had a great year, not an ideal Hall of Famer, but Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, Matt Stafford, Hall of Famer, Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs, Drew Brees, Matt Ryan, Hall of Famer, Ben Roethlisberger, Hall of Famer, T.Y. Hilton with his Andrew Luck years, potential Hall of Famer, Julio Jones again, Antonio Brown with Ben Roethlisberger. Josh Gordon did a lot of his damage, I want to say, on the Cleveland Browns that year, so I don't remember. I want to say that was maybe like even whoever, I don't even know who his quarterback. And then Matt Stafford again with Calvin Johnson. So like these guys had good quarterbacks delivering the ball to them. And then on the side panel there, like who was successful? Larry Fitz, generational, but he had some good quarterbacks throwing him the ball over the time. Not too many, but Amari Cooper was in Dallas with Tony Romo, then to Dak Prescott. AJ Green was Carson Palmer, straight into a few bad years, and then into Joe Burrow.
Andy Dalton,
right? Andy Dalton. Say what you want about Andy Dalton. Like the guy was solid. He was like he could deliver the ball to AJ Green. Jamar Chase, good quarterback. Jalen Waddle, Mike Williams, Mike Evans.
Mike Evans won it with Tom Brady.
Right? Drake London, jury's still out. But then you look at the guys with like the bad history, and I think it's just kind of like. It might even be, like the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Ted Ginn. I can't tell you who his quarterback was. Chad Pennington, maybe. John Ross in Cincinnati. Same thing with maybe like Andy Dalton. Tavon Austin was in St. Louis at the time with, for God's sake, Sam Bradford, maybe. Right. Roy Williams, right? Like Darius Hayward-Bay was in Oakland, and that was Jamarcus Russell overlap. Right, Kevin White was just an injury, an injury history. Justin Blackmon was in Jacksonville with Blake Bortles, I think.
Yep.
Right, so like we're talking about like guys who, if they failed, yes, they failed. Sammy Watkins was in Buffalo during the, I don't even know, EJ Manuel days, right? Like Sammy Watkins and EJ Manuel for 2 years. Like there's coincidence, right? Like there's a lot of overlap, but you could argue that a lot of these guys might have had a better career if a better quarterback was giving them the ball. I don't know. We're playing the hypothetical game, but I think combined with the hypothetical game, I think we're good to go on the mock draft because we could beat this dead horse all day, but I think really what we're talking about here is like, it has to be, I would be even more comfortable. Like say you are a playoff team next year and you have the 20th, 22nd pick, and you want to take a receiver in the first round next year because Keenan Allen's retiring, like more power to you. You've discovered that Caleb Williams is generational. You would need another receiver to replace him. 100%. Sign Keenan Allen for a 2-year extension. Get a rookie in the building and start training him. But I don't think this year it's worth the investment, and we'll get to that as we keep going. But yeah, would you be able to zoom in on this by any chance?
Oh, let me see. Did that work or no?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice. Good.
All right.
So
get it rolling.
Yeah, let's start this off. I mean, obviously, pick one. Bears.
JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, right. JJ McCarthy. All right. We all know it's Caleb Williams, right? And we're excited to have him here for sure. Definitely.
It's the best move to not be smarter than everybody else. And if
anybody
else had the first overall pick, everyone's taking Caleb Williams. Let's not overthink this.
So the real interest, I think, starts actually at number 2. There's been a lot of talk about Jaden Daniels not wanting to go to Washington. Unfortunately, it's not up to him. It's up to Washington whether they want to draft him or not. But they might be a little cautious based off some of the things he said to maybe take somebody else. What do you think happens at pick 2 for the Washington Commanders.
So the few rules I came into this mock draft with was I'm doing something like I'm doing it. What is the best thing for this team, whether they like overthink it or not, right? And what is the most logical thing? You know, some guys are just like, you know, I forget his name. I'm sorry, but the GM in Washington was a disciple of John Lynch, and he loved Brock Purdy. He was a big influence on Brock Purdy getting drafted and everything. And apparently, a lot of people are like making JJ McCarthy and Brock Purdy comps and this and that. I'm not really here for that. I'm just thinking like, what is the consensus? What is the best move moving forward? And like, same as like the Caleb Williams thing. Like maybe it's just best to not overthink it. I personally don't like Jaden Daniels. I think he's like the 4th best quarterback in this class, maybe the 3rd. I wouldn't take him at 2, but I think Washington does. Cliff Kingsbury runs like a run, you know, his traditional air raid, 4 wide receivers, a lot of outside throws. It's what Jaden Daniels is good at. He has an arm. I also have a big issue. He's like one of the oldest quarterbacks in this draft. He's like a 4 or 5 year starter. He's undersized for the way he plays. I think in the NFL, like, you know, just as any argument you could make about Caleb Williams being undersized and getting hit in the NFL, I think Jaden Daniels is like Justin Fields, but skinnier, right? And even Justin Fields kind of sometimes takes some hits where you're like, oh my God, how did he get up after that? Jaden Daniels is 40 pounds lighter, 30 pounds lighter. So I don't like him personally, but I think the logical and obvious move here is Jaden Daniels goes to Washington. I don't know about you.
I think it's really truly between Jaden Daniels and Drake May. But I agree. I think they do take Jaden Daniels. So should we go ahead and plug that in at number 2?
I think Jaden Daniels is the logical choice. I think Vegas odds, you know how much I like Vegas odds. Vegas odds have been really leaning towards Jaden Daniels as well. And so I think that's kind of just the consensus, obvious, you know, you start your franchise with a quarterback.
Okay, then pick 3. Now, I just want to kind of share some NFL draft history with some of the fans watching and whatnot. There's only been 3 times in NFL history where quarterbacks have gone pick 1, pick 2, and pick 3. Most recently, it was the Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance draft. Before that, you have to go all the way to 1999. And before that, you have to go all the way to 1971. So as quarterback needy as this league is, and as like obvious as it seems to us and whatnot, this isn't necessarily something that has happened very often in the history. So I know I've heard a lot of people throw out that 4 quarterbacks might go in a row. If that happens, that is historical because, like I said, 3 quarterbacks going 3 picks in a row has only happened 3 times. So with that being said, the New England Patriots, they need a quarterback, but they have lots of needs. Do you think they pull the trigger here and take Drake May? Or do you think they go a different route?
I'm interested to know what you think. However, like I'm trying to zoom out and look at like New England in the macro, right? Robert Kraft is a notoriously good owner, right? He kind of lets his coaches do his thing. He did get involved with the Tom Brady, Bill Belichick thing, but like, I mean, if I was an owner, I'd get involved for Tom Brady too, right? In my mind, I look at like the situation. So it's like Gerard Mayo is a first-year head coach, right? Team has many, many holes. I don't think you expect much out of that team this year. And it's like, it is a logical step to like, you give Gerard Mayo a rookie quarterback and it almost puts a little bit of unfair pressure on him in that division. I think that division is also like exactly where the Patriots want it, where I think it's going to be very competitive this year. I don't think it's going to be super competitive the year after. Depending on if the Dolphins pay Tua, right? Like now you have a Dolphins team that is without Tua. Tyreek Hill costs $70 million against the cap the year after. 7-0. Unreal, right? The Jets, depending on what Aaron Rodgers is capable of, it's, you know, next year it's potentially scary, or he could just get hurt again and it's just done. And then the Bills are in kind of a rebuild, but not really, like a mini retooling or whatever, right? But if you're the Patriots and you're looking for like long-term longevity, I think you'd be much better off taking a year back, right? Like building some depth pieces, like getting 2 draft picks from the Minnesota Vikings, or maybe even 3, and being like, you know what, we'll sit on it for a year. Gerard, there's not really much pressure on you, right? You're a new coach. We really like you. You're a Patriot. You get to take like a year of like getting acclimated, building some necessary like pieces on the areas that matter. O-line, D-line, right? Cornerback, stuff like that. So in my head, that's the macro version of it, and I like it. And then I think the Vikings, it makes sense for them because I think they want Drake May. And I think I don't know what the Vikings want. Who knows what they want, but it sounded like Kevin O'Connell would basically like Kirk Cousins with a bigger arm. That's Drake May, right? So like in my head, and you could probably put this trade together. If the Vikings can put together 11, 23, next year's first, and then they swap with New England at 3, I think this is the only, like you said, draft day trades are just impossible to predict, but I think this is a logical one where New England gets 2 premium players plus a pick next year, could be a quarterback next year. Then they start to do their like long-term rebuild. If New England is like, we want to be competitive this year, you got to take Drake May and you got to start building, right? But if they're not in love with Drake May, this is the logical place where the teams that would trade are Giants. They're picking at 6. JJ McCarthy probably falls there. So you got Giants, Raiders, Denver. I think the Vikings, this is where the Vikings make their move.
So I see, and I think this is where the Vikings would kind of sit still. I think it would cost a lot to get up to pick 3, right? And whether it's, Drake May, if they like JJ McCarthy enough, they might be better off trading up to the Giants rather than trying to sit there and mortgage everything to try and get up to pick 3. I mean, they'd really have to be, quote unquote, fall in love with a guy like Drake May and whatnot. But that's a very expensive, risky move to make, especially on a, but I did, we had this conversation personally, and I heard it kind of repeated on ESPN radio where the Vikings are not necessarily a bad situation for a rookie to go into. So maybe they feel comfortable doing that. I don't know. You want me to try and propose that trade?
Yeah, see if it works. If it works out, it's this year, the first 2 picks of this year plus next year's first. Because here's the argument while you're doing that is you're saying if the Giants do it, the Giants, assuming they're wanting to be competitive, which I think they are, if they're not ready to move off from Daniel Jones, right? Like I don't think they want to move on with Daniel Jones. I think you would pay just as much to swap into the Giants spot at 6 for JJ McCarthy as you would with the 3 spot with the Patriots to get Drake May. Because
am I not seeing something where the Vikings here?
Minnesota.
Or do I have to pick New England first to trade?
Yeah, pick a team and propose a trade. Yeah, New England.
So that's New England. Okay, trade with. Gotcha.
Yep, trade with Minnesota.
I'm sorry to cut you off. What were you saying?
Oh no, it's okay. I think JJ McCarthy would cost just as much if you're swapping with the Giants, because the Giants will say, well, we want JJ McCarthy here at 6. So if you want him, you have to give us King's ransom just as you would for Drake May, right? Because the Giants could just easily argue if they're picking up the phone, hey, we want JJ McCarthy at 6. So if you want JJ McCarthy at 6, rejected. So, you can't control that. We can't force it, but
no, in the past, but you look at what San Francisco gave up to move up pretty much to from a similar spot to pick 3. And I believe there was an extra first round pick in there that we didn't have in this trade. So, like I said, that would be very, very expensive potentially to try and sit there and mortgage that up. So I don't know. You want to continue with the idea that a trade does not happen?
Yeah. I mean, if that's the case, I still do think that like it makes sense for
Drake
Boston. Like Drake, I mean, Boston's going to be just as happy. They're going to talk about him as the next Tom Brady, and Jacoby Brissett gets to start the first 6 games. Drake May takes over after that, and you've got the new Tom Brady era starting with Drake May and this and that and the other. So I think it's either one is just as likely. But I would say if the Vikings, which have clearly been interested in trading up, I think this is where they would strike if they were to strike.
All right, but let's just for the sake of the mock draft, let's just draft Drake May to the New England Patriots. And then next we have the Arizona Cardinals at pick 4, which I've heard they're very open to trading back. However, you still see Marvin Harrison Jr. up there. You still see Joe Alt up there.
Yeah.
Which are two
I
potential
think this
guys.
is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Continue.
No, go ahead.
I think this is just the most. Marvin Harrison has taken 2 visits. It's the Cardinals and the Bears. That's it. And so I think Marvin Harrison is going to the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals have clearly implied they're not moving on from Kyler Murray at this point at all. So I can't, other than who did they trade from the Ravens mid-year? But like I can't name a single receiver on the Cardinals right at this point. Kyler Murray would benefit greatly from Marvin Harrison Jr. And most people would argue that he's the best player in the draft, most pro player ready in the draft. And so I think that's an easy Marvin Harrison. I think we don't need to overthink this one. Everybody's fallen in love with the Monty Austin Fort video going around where he's wheeling and he's dealing and this and that. But part of what you did last year is to get a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. So I think that's a little simpler than most people are trying to make it out to be. I think that's a Marvin Harrison Jr. pick. Easy.
And I know the Chargers would love a wide receiver as well. If Marvin Harrison Jr. does fall to them, I think they definitely take him. If not, I think they do have a little bit of a toss-up between Joe Alt and Malik Neighbors. However, my gut feeling tends to tell me that they're going to take Joe Alt and secure that left tackle position for their quarterback that they feel, very confident in moving forward with.
So I don't want to. I don't. No interruption here. Sorry. Rashawn Slater is like a top 10 left tackle in the league already, and that's who's there. He's the guy from Northwestern from a few years back. Rashawn Slater is like an absolute stud. So they've invested a good amount of resources on the offensive line. The Chargers have. This is another like trade down potential opportunity kind of thing. Very much gutted team on defense. I think you could argue that you could only name 3 starters, and it's Derwin James, Khalil Mack, and Joey Bosa. I get the Bosa brothers confused. I'm sorry. So I think just because Quentin Johnston had such a bad first year, I think for a lot of teams, Malik Neighbors is number 1. I would like to assume that like I love John Harbaugh and like how silly he is all the time with all that stuff. I think if they do not go Talise Fuaga at right tackle, because that's an argument to be made. You got Rashawn Slater on the left, you got Talise Fuaga on the right, and the right tackle from Alabama. I am apologizing.
Terrion Arnold. Oh, no, that's a corner. Sorry.
Nope. That's the corner. Right tackle from Alabama.
Latham. J.C. Latham.
J.C. Latham is an absolute mauler. Just as good at run as he is at the pass. So if you're trying to solidify offensive line, but realistically, you have Justin Herbert at like 26 years old. He's got somebody to throw to, and they're going to run the ball, a lot of play action. I think this is a Malik Neighbors team. I think for certain teams where Malik Neighbors is the number 1 receiver over even Marvin Harrison, I don't know if that's the Chargers. I think if you get him at 5, that's a steal. So I think this is a Malik Neighbors team personally. I don't know about you, but I think the offensive line has enough investment to the point where you can't just leave Justin Herbert out to dry. Like he will make Malik Neighbors a rookie of the year candidate, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns.
So number 6 with the Giants, is this where we see the Vikings maybe take another shot trading up?
I think you have to try again. I'm sorry with the.
Would you offer that
with the mock draft
trade?
simulator? I think you have to, because depending on what Kevin O'Connell sees out of JJ McCarthy, I don't understand the JJ McCarthy hype. He screams Zach Wilson to me harder than anybody I've seen since Zach Wilson. He had a very mediocre. He runs a pro style offense in Michigan. I get it. He didn't have to throw the ball a lot because they ran the ball and played solid defense. I get it. But like, I mean, I'm not drafting a game manager at 6. Like that to me is crazy. Like that might be disrespectful to JJ McCarthy. I don't know. There might be some JJ McCarthy fans out there and some Vikings fans that are like, no, that's crazy. He's going to be better than Caleb in this situation. But I think it's worth a try. And I think if, depending on what Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings want, I think yet again, you package 2 firsts from this year and a first from next year, and you try to trade with the Giants for JJ McCarthy. Because if not, I think with who's left with the Giants, unless the Giants want J.J. McCarthy, which is very possible, I think you could easily pull that away and the Giants slide 5 slots, and they're probably pretty happy with what they get out of it. So did that trade not go through again?
It did not go through.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like I said, that it's, it takes a lot of draft capital to move up and whatnot. I mean, this is also just a simulator. You never know what teams are actually going to do, but yeah. So, say they can't trade back.
I guess we're doing a mock with no draft. I mean, if you could just throw in some picks just so the first round looks accurate, like I think this is the move if you want to see if you could do like throw in a second as well, but
sure. So
whatever, it might not be this expensive, but I think this is realistically what you're going to see is some version of the Vikings trying to. Yeah, sure. See, and then next year's
first. Man, that's a lot of picks. That is a lot of picks, and that still gets rejected. Look at that.
This simulator's inaccurate because every team in the NFL would have
absolutely. We're using a free simulator. This thing's clearly cheap and broken.
Yeah, right. But no, I mean,
it all on the simulator, right?
Whoever it is, I think if the Giants could easily say, and here's I heard this floated out today from a very reputable podcast. I mean, I'll say it, whatever. It's Ringer NFL show. I love Ben Solak and Sheil Kapadia. And, if the Giants trade or draft J.J. McCarthy at 6, you could easily flip Daniel Jones to somebody for a 3rd or a 4th, right? So there's a team out there, the Raiders, the Broncos, that would take on Daniel Jones's money for 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, for a 3rd or a 4th round pick. And you're definitely getting a serviceable starter for a year or two. It's not ideal, but I think it's possible.
The Giants always seem to surprise me. I mean, I could also see them. I'm not sure what their current tackle situation is, but I could always see them going, hey, we do have Daniel Jones here. He is our guy. We're going to back him. We're going to make sure he's got a better line and take Joe Alt. Or I could see them even saying, we need more weapons and taking Brock Bowers.
They're solid at left tackle. They need a right tackle at Evan Neal, but they invested a 1st round pick into him. So I think that's like one of those NFL situations where you got to let the right tackle just play out and see if he could somehow just figure it out in the 2nd or 3rd year. You can't just replace him after his 3rd year at right tackle after being a 1st round pick. I don't see them drafting a tackle. I think if anything, they just invested in their defensive line. Depending on how high the cornerbacks are on their list, I don't think any cornerback, Terrion Arnold or anything in here, Kool-Aid McKinstry or anybody like that is worth that level of investment. Talise Fuaga, maybe, and you switch him over to guard. Roma Dunze, if they have him super high on their board, this could be a Roma Dunze team this early as well. I think it's the most logical J.J. McCarthy spot, whether it's the Vikings trading up, the Raiders trading up, the Broncos trading up, or New York sticking and picking. I think that's the most logical pick. So I would say if you're going to just click a button here, I'd say J.J. McCarthy makes the most sense.
J.J. McCarthy, and then Daniel Jones is on the hot seat. Now we have the Tennessee Titans.
This is the most obvious Joe Alt team, I think.
I completely agree.
Might be the most obvious Joe Alt team.
They definitely need left tackle help. So, now we have the Falcons at number 8, which I've heard a lot of people say that Dallas Turner is just the perfect fit here.
I agree. They have they need a stand-up pass rusher. Dallas Turner's like a raw prospect, that stand-up pass rusher. Fingers crossed by tomorrow this pick gets confiscated, right? Bears are picking at 8. Highly doubtful, but would be really, really nice with the tampering charges and everything against Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney and Ryan Pace. I think that'd be just a hilarious full circle moment because fuck Ryan Pace. And then, whatever. But yeah, I think Dallas Turner, it's one of those don't overthink it things. He's probably the best pure defensive prospect left at this point. Makes sense on Atlanta. The only thing I've heard once, and this is just one of those, don't quote me on this. I don't think that the Falcons are in love with Dallas Turner, but I think it's one of those, what are you going to just ignore the best player available? You're not going to do that. So I would say this is a Dallas Turner team.
All right. And then we have our Bears. Now, just because
Let's get into it.
How stuck I've been on this opinion, I really want to trade back. I mean,
see what you can get. Okay. And as you do this, I to anybody who's listening, I don't know how many viewers we have right now, but like, just hear me out, please. Here's why I want to go defense with number 9. Okay, whether it's Jared Verse you trade back, whether it's Byron Murphy or Johnny Newton, Latu, not my biggest like choice. Here's everything everybody throws out here is in ideal situations. That Rome Odunze is like Larry Fitzgerald, that Caleb Williams is the next, Patrick Mahomes and everything like that. Unless you are guaranteed a Super Bowl in the next 5 years with these two guys on their rookie contracts, one of them will be gone in 5 years. It's just a fact of finance, okay? You look at even the best and potentially highest paid receivers right now in the NFL. Devontae Adams, when he needed a payday, was shipped out of Green Bay. Tyreek Hill, when he was with Kansas City, needed a payday. He was shipped out of Kansas City for picks because you just can't afford to invest so much money on one side of the ball on two players that, are so dependent on each other. And sorry, I can't fathom that people are just like this out on DJ Moore. DJ Moore is going to be due for a contract extension too, right? So unless Rome Odunze just miraculously becomes better than DJ Moore and Keenan Allen and becomes a new number 1 wide receiver, and there's no options out there in free agency or a trade market in the next 3 to 5 years, there are better options for waiting for Caleb Williams to develop, and then you can invest 25 to 30 million. You look at T. Higgins right now. He's probably on his way out of the Cincinnati because they can't afford to keep him and pay Joe Burrow and then re-sign Jamar Chase. It's just not fucking possible. And then you go and look at next receiver up for extension is Justin Jefferson. He is due for $30 million a year. He's basically, the rumor mill is that he's threatening to leave or not re-sign if there isn't a solid quarterback throwing to him. Yeah, that's realistic. Why would Rome Odunze, if Caleb Williams flops and Rome Odunze is good, Rome Odunze will probably be gone unless you have a backup plan in there somewhere, right? There was one more receiver example I had, and it's slipping my mind right now, and it is Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and then, oh my God, please help me.
I don't know. Sorry, but
yeah, no, that's okay. But that's my argument here is like, you can't invest this much on the ball all at the same time. However, okay, you trade back or you stick and pick, and Jared Verse is a good player, right? He's even a top 10 at his position. Johnny Newton, Jerjon Newton, or Byron Murphy is a top 10 defensive tackle at their position. They are worth every penny. I'm going to give you statistics to back that up. The Bears had the worst pass rush rate percentage in the NFL. I had to repeat that to myself so I didn't get tongue-tied. They had the worst pass rush rate in the NFL throughout the entire NFL season last year. Okay? Number 1 was the Kansas City Chiefs. They have their 2 highest investments in pay at Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones. You can do that in the NFL. If one of your highest paid players is on offense, the other one is highest paid on defense, and they are equally impactful on each side of the ball to make you a championship contender, that is feasible, that is workable, that is doable. In 5 years, if you haven't won a Super Bowl with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze by then, now you are paying both of them $50 combined million. That'd be a pipe dream. Caleb Williams will get 50 on his own. Rome Odunze as a top 5 receiver will get 30 as well. Now you're committing $80 million to 2 players on offense that you just can't do that. And they're due for contract extensions at the same time. However, if Caleb Williams is worth every penny and you pay him $50 million a year, then you get a defensive player who's worth top 5 money. And by then Montez Sweat is older and this and that. Byron Murphy, Jared Verse, Johnny Newton, all these guys, that's a feasible thing to pay for. You can't do that. You can't stack this like this. People are so like pushing the I forget that thing. It's like the phrase of like passing the buck like forward or like, just not thinking future. You can't do that. It's fun. It's fun to do in Madden. It's fun to have a trio. It's fun to just throw the ball up and stuff. But if Caleb Williams is everything you hope for, he will elevate so many players around him that it won't really matter to have Roma Dunze. If Roma Dunze has a 700-yard season and 7 touchdowns in his rookie year, you can get 80% of that from almost anybody on the free agent market if Caleb Williams is what he is. Tyler Boyd will get you 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's 60-70% of the production for a guy who's going to cost you like 6 to 10 million for a 1-year flyer or a 2-year deal. And then you can move on and find guys to replace him. Defense is hard to find in the NFL in later rounds. In terms of pure value, I'd rather have a 16 to 17 game starter at defensive tackle that will play almost every other down, or 80% or 75% of the downs in a rotation, right? And you already were a bad defensive line. It's just a fact. You're one injury away from being awful again. Than having a third wide receiver who hopefully is elevated to 2 because you're hoping for injury. I'm not hoping for injury here, right? Like Keenan Allen is your slot receiver. Roman Dunze is a nice outside receiver option. You're gonna have more impact from a defensive player. If Jerjon Newton is good, if Byron Murphy is good, if Jared Verse is good, you're getting 3 extra possessions per game for guess who? Caleb Williams. You want to develop a rookie quarterback? Give him 3 extra drives per game by getting stops on defense, by getting turnovers on defense. Like, that's my rant on this 9 pick, and the Brock Bowers, Roma Dunze arguments is nauseating at this point. Like, you are not there yet to justify this pick. You're just not. You have no idea if Caleb Williams will be good. You need to solidify your defense. Your defensive line is already thin. You have to go tackle or end. I'll be upset about anything less.
So, David, I just want to take a second. Real quick, we have a comment here saying, talk about the Chicago White Sox. Yeah, sure. Let me just look up an episode of Bozo the Clown and screen share it, and we can just show you what a White Sox game looks like nowadays. Right?
They're projected for 25 wins this year, and I refuse to talk about Jerry Reinsdorf teams. I will never talk about Jerry Reinsdorf.
Talk about the White Sox. They suck. They suck. They suck. It's embarrassing, and that's all there is to say.
Unfortunately,
back to the football and back to the draft. Like I said, my number one ideal scenario here is that we trade back. However, when things shape out, I'm not sure if my number one scenario is actually possible or realistic, because when you look at the teams, just these next couple teams at 11, 12, 13, 14, we have the Vikings, the Broncos, the Raiders, the Saints. If they did want to trade up, why would they trade up to us? Like, why wouldn't they trade up to the Jets? It's not like there's a quarterback. I mean, even if there was a quarterback, the Jets don't need one. We don't need one. We just took Caleb. So it's like, you really have to be fearful of who the Jets are going to take if you wanted to jump up ahead of the Jets and trade with us. And I just don't see that necessarily being realistic. And then when we talk about our team needs, yes, tackle, edge. The thing is, we did invest a 2nd-round pick and a 3rd-round pick last year into defensive tackles. Though you could also say we took our 2nd-round pick this year and invested in a new end, which became Montez Sweat, which is a better defensive end that you're probably going to find in the 2nd round this year. So, that's where you're worth it. But it's like, okay, then are you really taking pick 9 and your 2nd-round pick and investing them both in the defensive ends? I do think that's more realistic than saying, hey, we're going to take 3 defensive tackles in 2 years with 2nd round, 3rd round, 1st round. So I think I'm really leaning here between Latu and Verse, both of which I think if you were able to drop back a little bit, you could still get a little further down. I'm just not sure if you're going to be able to drop back a little bit. So if you are going to drop back, I think you're looking at some of these teams that are down a little bit later, and one of them have to really fall in love with whoever they think the Jets might take to be able to jump.
So here to address that, right? Like, we're looking at the Jets will be probably more than likely happy with whatever's left. They would be happy with Olu Fashanu at right tackle, right? Toronto, is it Teron Armstead from the Cowboys? He's like 36 years old. He's not a long-term solution, right? However, neither is Aaron Rodgers. So if you're loading up to go for the Jets are probably the most volatile team in the NFL this year. They're either going to be a really, really good playoff contender or they're going to just be an Aaron Rodgers injury away from just being absolute shit. However, Tyrod Taylor is not a bad backup. So weapons for the Jets, if you got Roma Dunze or Brock Bowers falling to you, you know you're getting one of them. I think you're pretty happy for the Jets. Jets aren't trading up for one pick. And we know what that costs nowadays because we literally saw it last year. You're not going to trade up one spot with the 4th round pick just to get your choice of one of those two guys, right? Unless you're absolutely just in love with like the idea that Roma Dunze is like your new number 1 or your new number 1 or Brock Bowers is generational tight end, whatever. The Vikings don't need any of this. They're not. All the quarterbacks are gone. I think at that point, if all the quarterbacks are gone, the Vikings are probably going to trade down and probably take Michael Penix Jr. or Bo Nix. So you're not really interested in arguing with you're not really interested in arguing with the Vikings over that draft position. My mock draft just crapped out on me. Then we got the Broncos. The Broncos are in the same boat, right? They're not going to go up for Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr. if JJ McCarthy's gone at this point. So I think, again, like the basically what I'm trying to say is the first option you have here to trade down, I would say, is New Orleans. And New Orleans is pretty thin. They have the worst cap situation, them and the Chargers in the NFL. It's an absolute catastrophe. Who's their starting quarterback next year? Am I blanking? Am I having a brain fart right now?
Saints quarterback.
It's not Jameis. It's
Derek Carr.
Derek Carr. Jesus Christ. So from what I understand, they need desperate help at tackle to protect Derek Carr and move on. So this is an Olu Fashanu like move up for the Saints because if they really love him and they need a really, really good like offensive lineman here, Talise Fuaga or Olu Fashanu would be a really, really, really good trade-up opportunity. So you could go kind of down to 14 if you could see if that mock draft, if that trade registers at all in any way, shape, or form.
Well,
but I think
what are they
that
offering?
would be your. I think to go up 5 spots from 14 to 9, so we saw that costs a 4th round pick. You're getting a second. I mean, and that's it. You're moving down for a second for 5 spots. I'm not going to get greedy here, and I don't think that it's realistic to even. Yeah, that might be rejected. You might get a 3rd, right? So if we're going any further down, the Colts, if they're investing in Anthony Richardson heavily, right? Same thing. They might really love Roma Dunze, and they're like, you know what? We need to load up everything for Anthony Richardson. We want Brock Bowers, Roma Dunze, or Olu Fashanu. This is the obvious place where it goes. Talise Fuaga would be a good pick there too. Colts might move up. Bengals might move up to take Roma Dunze just because. I think the Jaguars. So if you can see if the Jaguars. I think the Jaguars are in panic mode.
I don't know if I can redo this.
The Jaguars would give you a second in a heartbeat to go get Roma Dunze.
Yeah, so it's not going to let me redo it because I already did it. It sucks that you can't just kind of.
What happened there?
Well, I mean, I proposed the trade just to see if it would go through for a 3rd, and it went through, and then that's it. So
okay.
So
let's pretend we have an extra 2nd round pick out of this, and the Saints would
a third.
Well, let's say it's a 2nd because in reality you'd get a 2nd.
I believe so. The Saints, too, right?
Yeah. So the Saints, let's say you're down to 14. Saints are now sticking and picking at 9. I think the Saints are taking Olu Fashanu, and there you go.
Now, the Jets, you said it's between Brock Bowers, Roma Dunze. Who do they take?
I think I can't imagine knowing how much Aaron Rodgers never really capitalized on making tight end. Like, he did and he didn't, right? He's had, like...
I mean, he took anybody. Jermichael Finley was his tight end for however many years, and it was fine. You know what I mean? So...
Yeah, and then he gave Robert Tonyan 18 touchdowns.
Right. So Roma Dunze would probably be.
I think Roma Dunze is the logical choice here. So Roma Dunze falls to the Jets.
Roma Dunze.
Yeah. Vikings, I would say, would trade down, but like, let's say I don't even know what they would do here if they didn't. I can't fathom Can't
David,
fathom they would take Michael Penix here.
We have one defensive end or one defensive player that has gone so far.
So I think this is logical where you're right. I mean, it would be like Olu Fashanu would go, Roma Dunze would go. The Vikings would have to – they just lost a lot of pass rush ability, losing Danielle Hunter, but then they got back from the Texans. I forget who it was, but they basically just swapped defensive ends. Brian Flores is like a absolute demon in terms of like scheme on how he would attack the offense and defense. I don't know, man. Like Sam Darnold might just want a new toy, but they have TJ Hawkinson. It's not happening.
Yeah. What about Latu reverse?
I mean, again, we're not trying to be Bears homers here where we just like give the Bears the best situation here because we want Jared Verse. I think this could bite you in the ass and they take Jared Verse and he just deals with you for the next 10 years because they would need a defensive end here.
I think so too.
I would love him to fall to the Bears, but I think Jared Verse is a logical pick here with whoever's left.
Okay. The Broncos.
Same with the Broncos. If they're sticking and picking at this point, they are probably taking offensive line. Talise Fuaga is a right tackle. They just invested a lot of money in Mike McGlinchey.
Yeah, right.
But Mike McGlinchey is absolute dog water. He is an awful player at this point.
But you can't double up on that. You have to kind of ride that out.
I think you do. And at this point, because of how much cap space you're committing to Russell Wilson and what you've done, this is where I would say is another logical trade down spot for the Broncos. And they would try to trade down and get Bo Nix or Michael Penix Jr.
So who, like, if somebody's trading up, who are they trading up for?
That's a great point. I think Brock Bowers at this point is too tempting to a lot of teams that might be, a little bit interested in like the potential talent. I think we've heard about Kansas City trading up for Brock Bowers.
What about the Jaguars?
Yeah. I don't think the Jaguars would go because they just invested a lot of money in Evan Ingram. Potentially the Bengals. I think the Bengals would love Brock Bowers. If you could see if a Brock Bowers trade right now with the Bengals would go through, they're a little bit thin at tight end. And I think for Joe Burrow with like a nice safety blanket.
What are they giving up to trade at third?
If you're going up from 12 to 18, yeah.
It doesn't
like
really
a third
matter
and a
because
fourth. Yeah.
We're doing a one-round mock draft anyway here.
Yeah, it's
so
a third
whatever
and
the
fourth,
actual
probably.
trades wind up being, it's a third and a fourth, you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think realistically, the only place we might have messed up a little bit is like I think the Jaguars are going to be incredibly aggressive to trade up for a receiver, or the Bills are going to be incredibly aggressive to trade for a receiver. But I can't sit here and say like the Bills are going to give up the next 2 or 3 first-round picks to go up to 8 or 9 to get Roma Dunze. However, if Roma Dunze falls to the Bears and the Bears don't want him, I think you have the pick of the litter of teams that are willing to give you the farm. I think the Bills would give you this year's 28, next year's first, and this year's second. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars would give you this year's second and like next year's second. I think Roma Dunze falling to the Bears would be like one of the greatest miracles of just, future-proofing this team that you could possibly have. You'd have like 3 second-round picks next year and 2 firsts. You'd be set for success forever.
This trade isn't going to be realistic. I'm just going to try and just force
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. So no, let me just offer him like next year.
Absurd.
Something stupid because we're just gonna say that, like I said, these trades are so tough to predict, and at the end of the day, we're just dealing with a computer algorithm here, so it's not like
second and a first, whatever.
There you go. Yeah, whatever. Propose. Oh my God. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Sure. Okay.
So if the Denver Broncos are sticking and picking, I mean, it is.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Whatever. The computer tells us that the Broncos are not willing to even take
seriously
a fucking haul.
Just ignore a first overall haul for.
I mean, you want me to just to force it through? I'll just trade this year's second. Like I said, we're just doing a 1-year draft.
Yeah, just see what you can force through.
Just goes to show you how silly these things are sometimes, huh?
Yeah.
Right. So here.
I wish there was an option to force it through no matter what.
Oh my God! Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, of course.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Whatever. Okay. I guess we're just picking at 12, no matter what. So.
Yep. If you're going at 12 with the Broncos, J.C. Latham's a good pick. Amaris Mims is a good pick. Fontanu's a good
You
pick.
can't even
Byron
say
Murphy,
that with a straight
Chop
face
Robinson.
right
I'm
now.
flabbergasted at this point.
All right, hold on. The Bengals are going to trade their whole draft next year.
Yeah, let's see what happens.
To just move up 6 spots, right?
Right. Ricky Williams this.
Well, I wonder
Ricky
if it's
Williams
like I wonder if it has to be fair. I wonder if it's like rejecting it on the Bengals side.
Maybe.
You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Nah, it's
Maybe.
gotta be. Can't be. The computer can't be that
you know
dumb.
what?
AI nowadays and everything.
Yeah, we're taking Brock Bowers here just because. Just take Brock Bowers to the Broncos and
just take
and we'll pretend it's the Bengals. Yeah.
Sure. So then, and then when we get to the Bengals, we'll swap it with the Broncos. So then, the Raiders here.
I think oh man, I don't know what the hell the Raiders are doing, honestly. But at
like
this point, Talise Fuaga is just the best prospect left, probably at this point. That or J.C. Latham. And I think if you're the Raiders and you have no choice at quarterback at this point if you're not trading down, or I think one team is going to be stupid and take a quarterback way too early. And then one of these quarterbacks is going to fall to the second or third round that we don't expect and we don't really know.
If they take a quarterback, are they taking Michael Penix Jr.?
No. If the Raiders are taking anybody, it's going to be Jaden Daniels, and they're going to trade the farm because Antonio Pierce was Jaden Daniels' coach all the way through his youth.
See, and here's the thing. Like, I think the Vikings with their later first round picks, they have 2 of them. I think at pick, 23, that might be a perfect spot to take.
That's a Michael Penix team right there.
Or Bo Nix, one or the other. You know what
that's
I mean?
a realistic one too. So
that's another reason why.
I would say if you're the Raiders at this point, you can't ignore they have nothing. Like you could argue any position here. You could argue Terrion Arnold is a great pick at corner for them because they have no cornerbacks, and I think it's one of those times where like everything in the NFL and mock drafts are stupid. I would say Terrion Arnold would make sense. Talise Fuaga makes sense. God, so many players make sense here. So I would say Terrion Arnold from Alabama just at the top choice. I think their defense is bad. Antonio Pierce is a defensive guy. They have enough pass rush. They just invested in Christian Wilkins, and they have Max Crosby. So they need to shore up the secondary. Let's go Terrion Arnold.
There you go. So now with our Bears, I mean, this is how you realistically wind up with either Latu or Byron Murphy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I almost like Johnny Newton from Illinois a little bit better at a 3-tech position. But I watched Byron Murphy this last few days. I think whoever doesn't take Byron Murphy is going to regret the shit out of it. Byron Murphy is an absolute fucking dog.
Byron Murphy?
Byron Murphy, please, and thank you. If we get Byron Murphy at 14, I'll lose my mind. I'll be so happy.
Okay, now we're on to the Colts.
Colts, I think it's an easy Talise Fuaga pick. You're going to protect Anthony Richardson. You're going to protect the future of the franchise. Talise Fuaga probably should be a top 10 pick. If he falls this far, you've got to take him or really like Amaris Mims or J.C. Latham. Man, it's so many. Like, this is one of the best like first round mocks I've ever seen that I'm aware of in a very long time. So,
Seahawks.
Personally, yeah, I think you got to take Talise Fuaga. Seahawks. I heard Benjamin Solak talk about that there is a rumor that DK Metcalf might get traded this offseason or during draft day. That'd be fascinating. Really? That'd be absolutely fascinating. I think if you're the Seahawks, I think Latu is one of the most obvious like bottom of the first round fall downs in recent memory. So I'm not even going to like get too fancy with that.
We're doing Latu?
I don't think so. No. I think no.
Okay. I fall down to the bottom of the first. You said okay.
I think Talise Fuaga. Yeah, I think he's going to be a bottom of the first round guy. He's going to be like Tampa Bay. I think that's a Tampa Bay team. I think Talise Fuaga, I think, is the obvious choice. He can move to guard either side. He can play right tackle.
Do the Seahawks go Johnny Newton?
I don't think so. Not yet. They just traded for Lawrence from New York, and I think they are Dexter Lawrence from New York. He's a outside edge 3-4 type of defensive end / defensive tackle. He just is what he is. I think Seahawks are somewhat thin at O-line. Geno Smith is going to be there for a while. I think the Seahawks are in a weird holding period where you just got to draft like best player available, have some depth on your offensive line, build from the inside. So I think you're going to take Talise Fuaga here.
Well, Talise Fuaga.
I'm sorry. J.C. Latham, right tackle.
J.C. Latham, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have the Jaguars, which I
think this might be the most obvious Brian Thomas Jr.
Yep. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, Brian Thomas Jr. He's like an awesome 1B tier receiver here. Man, Bengals, man. I don't know where they're at.
Well, didn't we say this is going to be the Broncos?
Right. So if you're the Broncos, I think, man, as the Broncos at this point, I don't know. You need long-term productivity and a project, basically. So you're either taking Quinion Mitchell or Troy Fontenot, Amarius Mims, Johnny Newton, Chop Robinson, Nate Wiggins. A lot of these guys are not projects at this point. If you're the Broncos at this point, like your cap salary and your cap situation is so fucked for the next 3 years that you have to hope that this guy develops and maintains his productivity for like at least the next like 3 to 4 years. And at that point, like first round offensive linemen are just guys you can't ignore. So we're going to take Troy Fontenot from Washington.
And then we have the Rams.
The Rams feels like a very Latu feel. They just lost Aaron Donald to retirement. And they are exactly the type of people who are going to take Johnny Newton, a 6'1", like quick twitch, Illinois guy, local guy, and fuck the Bears over for the next 10 years by taking Johnny Newton, replacing Aaron Donald, and he's going to be just as good because that's our luck.
And then the Steelers always have good drafts.
Steelers. I think they are going to invest in Amarius Mims at tackle. They need offensive line really bad. I think this is your first Jackson Powers Johnson option as well. If you really, really want to. I don't see centers going as early as 20, maybe ever. I don't even know if
I think the Lions took theirs at 20 or 22, maybe. Didn't they?
What year?
Recently, didn't they? Lions.
You could argue maybe the Giants did it with John Michael Schmitz.
I thought I'd have to look it up, but I thought when I was putting together,
oh yeah, that would be a couple years back though. He is
possibly. I thought I saw.
John Michael Schmitz was drafted 57th overall in the second round. Frank Ragnow.
That might be who I'm thinking of.
Frank Ragnow was drafted. When was Frank Ragnow drafted?
Selected first round of the 2018 draft.
Okay. From Arkansas at pick.
Why can't I find one?
20. So this is about right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what
All
I
right,
said. Okay.
fair enough.
So, yeah,
that's your.
spot on.
So you just got Justin Fields. I mean, you need a wide receiver here too.
Please
but I don't
do
think
Justin Fields the center.
Yeah, for the love of God, he needs protection up the middle.
I mean, that would be a little reach, but I mean, I can see it. But do you want to go?
Good for Justin Fields, man. Let's go. Hey,
Jackson Powers.
Hope he does well. Yeah, Jackson Powers.
And then we have
Miami.
The Miami Dolphins.
Man, again, another team where I'm like, I could see them going so many different places. They just lost their other corner to retirement. I think it was Byron Jones. And Jalen Ramsey is getting a little bit up there in age. You're going to end up paying a lot of money on the offensive side of the ball. So generally speaking, from a technical sense, like teams that invest a lot of money on offense are going to draft defense for cheap contracts over a long period of time. So I think this is where you're going to see Quinyon Mitchell go because there are no more defensive tackles available to replace Christian Wilkins. So you're going to see Quinyon Mitchell go at corner to the Dolphins.
And then the Eagles are up.
The Eagles would have drafted Jackson Powers Johnson. However, he is gone. So considering their defensive end situation, this feels like either a Chop Robinson or, Latu. He has to go eventually. Let's go Latu. The Eagles are just going to take a flyer. They're the only team that could legitimately risk this. And if he doesn't work out in 2 years, 3 years because of injury, they wouldn't suffer tremendously. So yeah, let's get Latu off the board.
So this is where the Vikings take Michael Penix?
I would say so. I think they're going to clearly take a quarterback at some point. I think
then
for
we
Sam
have Dallas.
Just going to happen. Dallas is going to take Amarius Mims because they just lost their left tackle, and they're going to figure out their tackle situation with Amarius Mims.
And then our rival Green Bay.
I think this is either Chop Robinson or Cooper DeJean. Chop Robinson would make sense from a pass rushing standpoint. Cooper DeJean makes sense because he's white.
Which one do you want?
Cooper DeJean makes much more sense. Okay. He's white. He gets to fit right into Green Bay.
Right. Start helping them milk all those cows.
Oh, yeah.
Away. All right. Tampa Bay.
Chop Robinson.
Chop Robinson, Tampa Bay. Yep. Arizona, which we had them earlier, taking Marvin Harrison Jr., so they already took a wide receiver. Yeah. Otherwise, I would be targeting a guy like Adonai Mitchell. But
I think they need everything. So Nate Wiggins, just the top player left on the board. 6'1" corner, really good athletic.
Buffalo Bills need a lot too, man. They might take Adonai Mitchell just because they lost Stephon Diggs recently.
I think that's the number one most commonly drafted player for the Buffalo Bills at that point. So I'm going to take AD Mitchell. I think they're going to take a receiver no matter what. If they don't trade up or if they stick and pick, they're going to take AD Mitchell.
And then we have the Detroit Lions.
That's one of those teams that doesn't need anything. So it's kind of whatever you feel like grabbing, I guess.
Oh, man. Another
don't need a
offensive weapon.
But yeah, I would say this feels like a – so Xavier Worthy feels like a very dickhead Lions pick because it just makes them even more terrifying because they're going to have Jahmyr Gibbs and all these speedsters. So let's just make Detroit more terrifying and take Xavier Worthy just because it makes sense.
And then the Ravens.
I think the Ravens lost a lot of players on defense. And again, I think they have invested a good considerable amount of money on defense, especially though. And you're going to protect. They have Ronnie Stanley's a good left tackle, but I don't think they have a right tackle if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to say Tyler Guyton is either probably the most logical choice. Graham Barton makes no sense. That's center. So I'm going to say Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma.
And then San Francisco.
I don't even know about this one. San Francisco, their corners are getting up in age. Defensively, I think this is a Kool-Aid McKinstry team. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then the last, the Chiefs.
Before Rashee Rice, I would have said they probably just go offensive line. But because of the situation they're in, I'm going to go and say, oh, man, Ladd McConkey just feels like a chief, like a little white dude who just runs routes, right?
All right, and there it is.
Ladd McConkey or Keon Coleman. But I'm going to say Ladd McConkey.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's our mock draft in total. Like I said, flopping also the Bengals and the Broncos, which it wouldn't let us do. But, yeah, like I said, these things are interesting. And to go even past one round is kind of it becomes exhausting.
We
Especially
leave
as
that to the
Bears fans,
professionals.
yeah, right, exactly, and they're wrong most of the time as well. So we'll just let them do that, right? But yeah, that was fun. Like I said, we don't ever sit there and really do those mock drafts like that and whatnot. But yeah. So if the Bears come out of this with Caleb Williams, trade back, and Byron Murphy, and then you're able to maybe address the center position in the second round, or you're able to get a guy like Xavier Legette to be your wide receiver 3 in the second round. I think that's something that would be very, very positive at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think overall our positions are clear. We're 48 hours away, and I'm so happy that it's going to be over very soon. But I am very, very excited for Thursday. The 9 pick interests me much more than the first pick, unless, God forbid, there's some sort of like mic drop moment where the Bears don't take Caleb Williams. I don't think that's possible. But yeah, it's going to be very, very entertaining off season, and then you get to kind of move forward from there and see what kind of free agent signings you could potentially look for, and guys who are still in the free agency wire, free agency cuts in training camp, and all that stuff. So I'm pretty stoked for this to be done.
So I know we started the show with the 2-minute hype video that I made the other day.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can just end the show with the same video, right?
Agreed. Yeah,
So
if you can save
everybody,
that picture, by the way, of our draft, I want to see how accurate we are.
yeah, I'll definitely save it. I mean, if not, it's going to be forever saved in the show, so you can always go back and relook it up. So yeah, everybody, thanks for joining us. Like I said, this was our first long live show that we've ever done together, so it was an experience. We appreciate everybody watching, and we're going to leave you off with exactly what we started you with, and that is the hype for Caleb Williams to be here in several days and be our next Chicago Bears quarterback.
Have you thought of that moment though? First pick of the
2024 NFL draft. Yes, I do. If they draft me, my plan is to go work my ass off, get after it, get in the playbook heavily, and handle things the way things need to be handled.
Ryan Poles and the Chicago Bears, to me, succeeded in making Chicago a place that has the requisite pieces to have a young quarterback be successful.
They got a good defense. They got good players on offense. It's pretty exciting, if you could go into a situation like that. I like to think that when it's time to be surgical, it's time to be surgical. There's been many games where it gets late in the game and I've ran or scrambled and threw a crazy pass. That's been the artist, the magician. And then there's been times where even when I hurt my hamstring and I couldn't run, I sat in the pocket the whole time, the rest of the game and delivered the ball. It's important to be in the pocket. It's part of the game. It's also important to be out of the pocket. I want to go to a place that wants to win.